Friday the 13th of October it is today.
It doesn't come up on the doorsteps too much, Tony.
No, it doesn't. That's because it was 1307. Yes, these are the charges of heresy against the Knights Templar. Now, the Templars were very interesting because they were supposedly a Christian order, and yet they were really the world's first ever multinational corporation. They were bankers. They used to move money around, and also
they were Masons.
Possibly.
He's coming to that.
They killed a lot of people out in the Crusades, even actually sacking the Constantinople, which was supposed to be the head of the Holy Roman Empire at the time, or at least where it was a very important Christian city. Bizarre. But anyway, just a little bit of information about that, because we're told often that the evidence that these people were not Christians and doing some weird rites was extracted through torture. That is partly true, but it's also true that there were 3 whistleblowers. We like to hear about whistleblowers, and it's one of the things that I think nowadays we're told, well, the government wants to have whistleblowers, and yet when someone does blow the whistle, often they're persecuted. I mean, a friend of ours, Annie Mashon, former MI5 officer, and David Shelley were chased halfway around the world by the authorities, and David himself was taken to court. Even though the government's saying we want whistleblowers, when one appears, what happens to them? Very often, they are given the 3rd degree, shall we say. But anyway, Esquin of Floyan, Bernard Pelet, and Gérard of Byzol were 3 Templars who were whistleblowers. They weren't tortured. They gave the French king the evidence that he needed in order to put the Templars down, and there were 5,000 Templars were arrested by Philip IV of France, as Martin quite rightly said, on Friday the 13th of October 1307. Which brings us on to the Freemasons and this story from last week about the former Tory mayor of Weston-Super-Mare and Vice Chair of North Somerset Council, Philip Judd, who has admitted to these pornography charges. He's being charged next month. But let's leave these counts of possessing 151 films and 200 images of children, and also taking some of these images. What are your thoughts about Freemasonry, Ron, and whether it should be on the list there when you sign up as a councillor?
Correct.
Or I believe as a councillor officer too, you're told we want to know what your outside interests are, please.
Well, if they got nothing to hide, why are they worried about declaring a membership? I mean, I've declared every single membership I've ever had, from the King Charles Spaniel Association to the National Road Society, etc., none of which clashes with the City Council. However, in relation to the Masons, I don't like the secrecy, I don't like the privilege that goes with it, I don't like the way in which they operate, I don't like the way in which they mutually support each other, quite often in issues that are either very close to being illegal or indeed illegal. And when I was a parliamentary candidate twice, both in South Gloucester in the election there and against Liam Fox, I came up against the Freemasons, using their power and ability and connections in both the police, the banking situation, in relation to the official receiver's office, where they're all in the same temple or whatever they call it,
lodge, whatever, yeah.
Right? And what they were doing, again, was coming back to what we were saying before, which was picking on family businesses. Some were farmers. The second guy was a builder working out of Ashton. And they were trying to force them out of business, take over their land, develop that for housing, etc., and for profit.
Well, the obvious question is, how did you know that it was a Freemason doing this? Because, obviously they do everything they can to keep their association secret.
In both cases, the individuals came to me in desperation because nobody would listen. But they were told when they said that they were going to complain about the treatment of the foreclosure on their current accounts, etc., by the banks, that police officers told them that, one, it was no point taking it any further because the manager and the official receiver and anything in relation to crime, in relation to those issues, they were all in the same branch of the Masons.
Martin, what's your thought about this? I mean, surely it's a basic thing of probity. Any kind of organisation, particularly a secret society that you're part of, you should be declaring it if you're standing for public office.
Well, I think that's absolutely right. And, of course, the Freemasons... I see Freemasons... If Freemasons didn't exist, then they would probably be created by those with power and wealth. And in recent times, the propaganda duo in Italy was the Freemason Lodge at the heart of the Gladio operation run by NATO. So you've got the mafia, the fascists and the intelligence services all in the same lodges, including the politicians, and they're involved in terrorism, money laundering, etc., all of which has been covered extensively in Imposimato's book La Repubblica dei Strani Impuni, the Republic of the Unpunished Massacres. He's the head of the Italian Supreme Court. And it's not so much the Masons that's the problem. Propaganda Duo was a Freemason organisation that was actually being instrumentalised by the CIA and other major intelligence agencies. And I think all secretive organisations can be used in that way. The Masons have a historical background of, as we all know, the Paulson affair from the 60s and so on. Masonry has often been associated with local government corruption. And also in the judiciary too. I can remember on a visit to the Masonic Lodge here in Bristol being pointed out to different magistrates who were... and they were actually only acting as little sort of foot soldiers standing to stop people going down the stairs. And they were being ordered around by other people. And you think, well, this is the weird thing about it. You've got magistrates who are supposed to be upstanding pillars of society ordered around by who? Anyway, let's have a listen now to Jack Lopresti. He's a Freemason, he's an MP, and he had some stuff to say to me a couple of years ago about Freemasonry when he came on this show back in April 2012.
I think Freemasons generally for many years have realised now if they are going to survive, society is changing and they need to be more open, transparent, and they are. I mean, I'd be more than happy to arrange for you to go and visit Freemasons Hall in Bristol or one of the Freemasons Halls in South Gloucestershire, and you'll see it's a positive organisation which does a lot of good work for local charities.
I'll tell you one thing I might ask you is for the book, the little book for the Bristol Masonic book, which has got actually the names of who it is, because that's why people, I think, mostly question Freemasonry, because they don't know who the Masons are.
There are I understand, lots of organisations which don't publicise their membership, and that we can have a debate about, how much that should be transparent. But if you want, I'll send you a copy of that. It's interesting. It's like a play. There's nothing remotely sinister about it. And with the internet, you can find out probably more about Freemasonry than the average Freemason will ever learn in his lifetime.
OK. Now on to Filton.
So I'll send you the book and I'll arrange a visit.
Thank you, Jack. Well, the book never turned up. In fact, I asked Jack several times for it, and Steve Rawlings, who's the secretary here in Bristol, no book, and no visit either at the end of all that. So nothing much came of that. But anyway, Ron, in Wales, just across the Bristol Channel, every single person in public office has to declare this. There's a little box that says, are you a member of a secret society, like there was here for a couple of years in the 1990s. Why is it that in England, we don't have this, but just over the water they do?
Well, I think there's been the ability to influence the, shall we say, the approach and the laws in England to be different from Wales. And I think it's a shame because, like I said, if they are, as Jack Lopresti is just claimed, working for charity, fine. But I think the only charity that they're working for, from what my experience has been over 29 years as a councillor, is it's all about self-promotion, self-protection, and indeed the ability to manipulate power at a local level and in secret. And that should not happen. OK, just one of the oaths that the third-degree Freemasons swear, and Philip Judd was a Master Mason, so we'd have sworn this oath. It says, "Oh, that my throat had been cut across, my tongue torn out by its roots, and buried in the rough sands of the sea at low water mark, where the tide ebbs and flows twice in 24 hours. Ere I had been accessory to the death of so good a man as our Grand Master Hiram Abiff."
Martin, just about P2, this Italian. Just tell us, what did P2 actually achieve? It was really essentially a kind of secret parallel government in Italy, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, if you remember, the Roberto Calvi was found hanging underneath Westminster Bridge with 2 bricks in his pocket. He was a Vatican banker. Now, what Pope Francis has just done...
Can I just point out one thing about that? Because it was recognised by many to be a Masonic ritual murder, because what had happened to him was he was dangling, but as the tide came up, it went over his body and back again. And this is one of those oaths which I've just been spelling out there.
Well,
so some recognise this,
well,
but
what
others
Pope
don't.
Francis has just done is he's just completely sacked the people running the Vatican Bank and appointed a whole load of other people. Whether that will get to the bottom of all of this is another matter. P2 was absolutely essentially involved in Gladio, and anybody, we mentioned Gladio quite frequently on this show. People just need to do a web search and they will find what Gladio was. Gladio was essentially NATO's secret armies operating in Western Europe and possibly now in the Ukraine. They're involved in terrorism, money laundering, linkages between the mafia, the far-right fascist terrorists, and the intelligence services and the military. And this is not even disputed in Italy. As I said, Imposimato's book, which came out in 2012, covers all of this, and he is in fact the head of the Italian Supreme Court, and his information is based upon decades of investigation by the police force.
Now,
in other words, NATO, I haven't been to stress this enough, NATO has a track record of provocational terrorism. Killed hundreds of people in Italy in the 70s and the 80s, and they're still doing it in the Ukraine today.
Okay, yes. One thing I'll say about Philip Judd, this former mayor, Tory mayor from Weston-Super-Mare, is due to be sentenced next month, is he was also in the Royal Engineers. And something that I know, actually, in a book about the Army, I was quite surprised to read, was that everybody in the Army Council, every single member of it had to be a Freemason traditionally in the Army. So, I think there's also something else that needs saying here, is obviously that not all Freemasons are evil people by any means. But what's happened is there's been a characteristic change in the organisation over the decades. Slowly but surely, this organisation that in many ways was benevolent as a kind of speakeasy place where people could speak their mind freely has changed its characteristics, with much darker motives taking over many of these lodges. Anyway, well, I'm joined now by Kevin Phillips from Avon and Somerset Police Federation. Hi, Kevin. Welcome to the Politics Show.
Good evening, Tony.
Freemasonry. It's Friday the 13th, the old day of the arrest of the Knights Templar back in 1307 by the French King Philip the Fair. Really, I think it's fair to say that there's the same sort of suspicions put on Freemasonry today as there were in the Knights Templar in the days of yore. What are your thoughts about whether police officers should be declaring their membership of Freemasonry, Kevin? Because we've had several attempts to get this done, but apparently now all it is voluntary. Now, of course, everybody knows that if it's voluntary, people are just simply not going to do it.
I suppose I can probably say that my career's peaked now, so it won't matter what I say with regards to the Freemasonry. My personal view is it's not, it doesn't work with the police service, but if you try and ask people, and you quite rightly say there's been many attempts to get people to actually say whether they are Freemasons or not. I remember a number of years back where Avon and Somerset sent a list round asking people to actually write down whether they were Freemasons or not. Clearly you didn't get many volunteers on that one.
I mean, if I was a Freemason, I wouldn't write my name on there until I was actually told I had to write it, in which case I probably would reluctantly.
Yeah.
So what happened? Were there many people that did?
No, the majority of people that actually wrote on there were the people that weren't Freemasons, clearly.
And do you think this is actually an issue talked about amongst police officers? Do they sometimes wonder whether cases are dropped because of some kind of Masonic connection?
I would probably suggest that it's a lot less now than what it might have been in the past. I think genuinely the majority of people really don't care whether somebody's a Freemason or not.
It's interesting to hear how things have changed. Do you think there's any moves for there to be more transparency about Freemasonry?
I think there's always going to be moves to make sure that happens, but how you actually impose it, because I think if you start trying to lean on people and make them to declare whether they're Freemasons or not, that will just drive it back underground again.
Well, possibly, but I mean, we've got this thing which goes right across the business community, and you were talking about the police as a business earlier on, and I suppose I'm hypocritically agreeing with you here, but all effective businesses have a probity policy. Probity being, let's just be open about what our interests are outside this organisation. The only thing is, I've never seen one that actually includes Freemasonry in there. So they'll say, tell us if you're a member of a professional body, etc., but never tell us if you're a member of a secret society. I just find that particularly shocking, especially after this revelation last week. Philip Judd down in Weston-Super-Mare, who was the Tory mayor of Weston-Super-Mare, deputy head of the North Somerset Council. Turns out he has been a Freemason, and one wonders whether some of those connections might have stopped prosecution in the past for his generating child pornography.